Hey everyone, welcome to the first talk this year at Mainly Human Design. Super excited for this talk with Liya. Liya is a designer at Google. She's been working on AndroidXR and some really cool stuff. She's going to talk about XR onboarding, which I am super hyped for. XR onboarding is such an important topic because basically no one on the planet has used XR. Comparatively, and everyone needs to be taught how to use it. It's such a new technology, and so I'm really excited to hear some insights from Liya.
Hi everyone, my name is Liya Safina. I am a freelance designer at Google, and I have been an independent designer for the last decade, which is really exciting because I think there is a really interesting shift in the workforce to have more people stay independent while working with bigger companies with bigger products, and you don't necessarily always have to go in-house. And I'm the proof that you can do it for over 8 years, and you can work on a lot of really, really good stuff. So to everybody who is pondering their career, pondering what to be next, I just want to say that, finding a full-time job is, of course, driven with security, but you can still do a lot of really cool stuff. It's freelance. That's a little interest. But so to give you a little bit more of my background and what I'm going to be talking about, I want to start with a little bit more of a framing that I did not normally position myself as an XR designer, even though I do XR design. The way that I talk about my skill set and my specific niche is innovation design. And while it might seem fairly broad, it is a very, very particular arc, which requires me to be fairly well versed in every single new technology that comes out there. So the way that I talk about what I do is, I'd say companies invite me to figure out the UX or UI of their product when there are no best practices in place. You cannot just go and copy from somewhere else. You cannot just go and follow a particular guideline. You have to figure out the product from scratch. And over my career, I've been tackling such industries as e-commerce. Of course, I worked on the Nike e-commerce app. I also worked on Alibaba e-commerce app. And you can imagine that, Eastern UX is completely different from Western UX, which is really, really interesting for when you're trying to marry both in one app and cater both audiences at the same time. I worked on a lot of blockchain products as well, including Coinbase Pro, which was terrifying. So I had to learn all the Bloomberg terminals on how the traders on Wall Street work and how does this apply to crypto. I worked on a product before Coinbase actually acquired it. It was called an app. An app was called Tagomi, and then Coinbase acquired it and turned it into Coinbase Pro, which is really interesting. And so, of course, there are a lot of other things here. I worked on 2 dating apps, Bumble and Hinge, which is really, really fun. Even though, ironically, I met my partner on Tinder. Go figure. Did I do my job well enough? And additionally, before we switch into the XR fields, specifically as a focus of this talk, one of the best projects of my career was working on the new city that Toyota is building in Japan. So what they did is they actually decided to convert one of their large factories right by Mount Fuji into a city for people. And in that city, it's not only the self-driving cars and autonomous technology, it's also all the types of robotics and AI and smart homes that you can imagine, which is a very, very ambitious project. They are actually opening the first phase of this city this year, but you can imagine as a UX designer, it was a really, really tough job, not only because you're designing for services for something that is not yet built, but you're also designing for Eastern and Western audience at the same time, because there's, of course, a lot of Japanese Toyota employees that are going to live there, but also a lot of researchers and partners from the rest of the world. You're designing for the end user of all of these technologies, but you're also designing the dashboards for people who are monitoring all of these robots and self-driving fleets and trying to catch, if something's broken or congested, etc. So this is all in all to say that being an innovation designer is a hard to define job. It's a hard to define niche, but that's something that I really enjoy and something that I build my career around. And very serendipitously in the last few years, I've been invited to work on a lot of AR, VR projects, and this is how I find myself here. I did want to show a really quick video of the Toyota City, just so you guys get an idea. I think it's a very intriguing project. I think it's like super interesting to take a look at it. I don't think we have sound, so I'll just voice it over. So this is an idea of a traditional city where you have all the mobility side by side. For Woven City, they're separating where the self-driving cars are going to go, where the personal mobility like bikes and scooters are going to go, and when the pedestrians are going to go. And they're weaving all of this into this new fabric of the city where, because self-driving cars rely heavily on sensors, right? You can guarantee increased security for pedestrians, and you can weave it all together in different ways beyond what normally the cities do, right? And I think Toyota is one of the best companies that I've ever worked in terms of how much they respect people and how much they just really pay attention to security, to privacy. They're not saying that, hey, we need technology everywhere. We're saying if you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. So this is just a quick preview for anybody who's curious to take a look at it. There's a lot of materials out there. There was an XR part of this project as well, but I'm not going to be focusing on it today. So this is just out of curiosity, a quick teaser for all of you. All right, so the first ever project I worked on in the AR space was this amazing app called Altoida. And Altoida is an app that is kind of mostly focused on the medical field and is designed for early Alzheimer's detection. We know that Alzheimer's and just brain disease is like one of the hugest threats, especially for aging population, for anybody over 50. And I was really shocked when I learned that till now, doctors are still kind of trying to catch the disease through pen and paper tests. And what Altoida does is that it takes an app that you can download on your phone or you can download it on your tablet. And tablet, is like very often a tool that's preferred by people over 50 just because everything was larger and you could like set up larger fonts. And then you take a few really interesting gamified tests that measure over 20 different biomarkers in your brain. The tremor, the processing speed, the kind of immediate memory, long-term memory, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now I'm sharing a few onboarding screens that we designed to really focus on this audience. This is not, a millennial, not a Gen Z audience. It's mostly a little bit people who are older, right? So you need to really make sure that you're clear, that you're setting the priorities, that you're setting the expectations, especially as we get to the AR part of the app. So this is before we get to the AR part, we're really kind of setting some of the preferences. So you have some non-AR, non-gamified tasks that you need to do just so we can set the benchmark or the baseline. But once you get into the AR part, it is really fun. So people can move around their house, they can place different objects, and then they can memorize where they place them, and then they end up retrieving them. There's a situation of a simulated fire in your house, which is maybe not as fun, but adds a little bit of additional pressure and context for you to perform tasks. And like, okay, if there was a fire, what would you grab first? Where did you place this? And some other tasks. So we really, as we were tackling this, we were thinking a lot about how do we set the expectations? How do we show, how many steps is left? We also, these screens don't show it, but we also kind of talk a lot about how much time do you have to button for something. Like this exercise will take 3 minutes. This exercise will take 2 minutes. So that was really, really fun. And just going back to the slide that I showed before, these are some of the really interesting additional features that we were exploring. So beyond just, what is the word I'm looking for? Detection of the symptoms, we're also thinking about ways to educate people on their brain, right? And so as a way to visualize this, I came up with the idea of this filter where you can kind of just take your brain out of your head and you can tap on different areas and learn about your brain activity and see how this maps to the task that you performed, and just kind of learn by seeing, learn by doing, learn by like actually putting everything into context. So that was my first kind of foray into the AR field, which is really interesting. And this is an example, just so you know, because you're sending your results to the doctor. Again, this was a really, really interesting task where you kind of have two user groups in mind. You have the doctors who receive the reports, and you have the patients that need to access the reports. And fun fact, I really, really believe in cross-pollination overall in terms of innovation. I think that, you can take some features from one field and apply them to the other fields. So the little trackers of your brain activity here were actually inspired by financial trading. So like however you see stocks perform on Robinhood, or anything else. So we kind of took that and applied that to the brain hack, which was really, really fun. And there's a very practical example of cross-pollination. So as we will get more into the onboarding, for XR, let me set the stage a little bit more for what I'm doing for Google and how to kind of frame the insights that I'm going to show you in a second. So a little over a year ago, Google reached out to me on a very, very secret project. Didn't tell me anything. The whole time I was interviewing, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I know that I was going to be doing something in the AR/VR field, right? Now, finally, I can talk a little bit more about it, which makes me really happy. But as they have announced in December, they are coming out with 3 really interesting, distinct aspects for the field, right? So number 1 is the handset that is announced for this year. Number 2 are the glasses for the release date. There's no specific release date, but I think one of the most exciting aspects is the operating system, the AndroidXR operating system. And the reason why it's so exciting is that it's not only designed for Google products, but it's actually designed for every single company and startup that are operating in the XR world to use. So the same way that you can have Android installed not only for Google Pixel phones on all the different phones, except for iPhone, is the same way that people are going to be able to use AndroidXR on different headsets. I am specifically focusing on a few apps that I'm a huge fan of Google Maps. Personally, I'm a super user of Google Maps as well. And so I'm very happy to, again, be able to share finally. I wasn't able to talk about it for a while, that I'm working on Google Maps XR. And I'm also working on Google TV. The interesting thing about Google TV is that media streaming and just movie watching, one of the hero cases for XR. This is one of the top reasons that people who purchased Apple Vision Pro and just wanted to return it but decided not to return it is because of how much they loved watching movies. And so that was a really, really interesting use case for us. And of course, when you're designing the apps, as even I've shared, we need to think about onboarding. It's not always going to be a tech-savvy person. It's not always going to be a person who's switching from one headset to another headset. It could be a completely novice user. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share a few principles and a few insights that we learned from research, talk about them, and then I cannot show what I'm working on right now, but I wanted to show a few examples from previous products that we're using as baseline as well and discuss how that is applied. Also, if there's a little bit of a noise, I'm sorry. I'm dialing from South by Southwest. It was impossible to find a quiet spot, so hopefully you guys can hear me okay, and I'll hear you during our Q&A. I'm trying to get to noise canceling. All right, so a few principles, insights rooted in research, rooted in a lot of amazing work of our user testing team, user research team that I'm happy to share with you today as you're thinking about your own product, as you're thinking about designing onboarding for any XR experience. Here are a couple of principles that are universally true that should help any learning process, any designing process that you are going through. So, number 1, onboarding can be really beautiful, but if you're making it skippable, and making it skippable is the best practice, we can expect up to a third of the users to skip it. And it's okay, and this is something that we should be designing for, right? If we know that the users are going to skip it, we still need to have a backup plan by tooltips or something else that will help them still understand the features, isn't they're not going through like a lengthy onboarding process. So the reason people skip, number 1, many prefer to figure out UI for themselves, and they might just feel impatient to start or just in the skip mode. They might not even be reading it. Number 2, sometimes experienced users may feel like tutorials are for novices only. They're like, oh, I know everything. Maybe I'm not going to read it. And then some might skip by mistake. And we need to be very forgiving, and we need to design the onboarding in such a way that you can really easily return to it if you skip by mistake. Number 2, User overwhelm during onboarding out of the box experience, UBI is the abbreviation for that, is way more common than expected. So you might be thinking as an XR designer, like, oh, it's very fluid, it's very minimal, but you could always check in with people because even minimal onboarding could feel very, very overwhelming. So to give you a little bit more context, new XR users might need a moment to take in their environment before they can pay attention to instructions. So maybe give them a breather, maybe load things slower, maybe design it in a way that things appear gradually, right? Just so they can gather their bearings and orient themselves a little bit more. With multiple modalities presenting different information to users, it can be hard to process all of them at the same time. What do I mean by modalities? Because people have different learning styles, you might want to share the instructions on screen, say them out loud, and also write them out. So it will be an illustration, text, and audio. And it's a good practice to kind of support learning through all the different learning styles. But what is important is that it should really match one-to-one. It might be really hard to process if you're writing out one thing and you're saying out like a little bit of a lengthier or a different way to phrase it. So we need to really pay attention to present the information in a very streamlined way, in the way that everything is very cohesive. And most importantly, XR tutorials should help direct the user's attention. If everything is around you in 360 degrees, you're tempted to look everywhere, right? So we need to highlight the fields that we want to have them look, add a little bit of motion, add a little bit more active color. Just be very forgiving and hold their hand and guide them as we're taking them through the process. Next up, users learn when it's relevant, not before. So this is a really, really interesting thing because especially when your app is complicated, and a lot of the apps I'm working on are fairly complicated. You need to explain 8 different features. You need to segment it out. You need to and you cannot make it less, just because it's complicated. You really need to chunk it up. So one of the principles that we're following is that do not preemptively tell people something that they're not encountering right now. Show them a relevant task and onboard them to that specific task, right? So just get people invested. If they're not invested, they're not going to worry. Spotlight why a user will benefit from a feature. A good example is just to highlight, like, not just to say, hey, we have this feature, FYI, but first say, like, if you want to get XYZ benefit, this is why you might want to pay attention to this feature, and this is how you use it, right? So you frame it contextually and make it relevant to them. And then let the user experience the aha moment as fast as possible. Again, and I try to, by the way, when you look at all the items that I'm highlighting here, I'm trying to keep them under 7 items, because people, when we think about kind of the memory and the immediate buffer that we keep at any given moment, it's really hard to keep anything more than 7 points. Mine normally is even 5, like shorter. So even with this list, it's not going to be more than 7 points because I really want to make sure that we chunk up what we're talking about today. So present information in discrete chunks, right? Chunk it up in items, make it contextual. Keep them focused on one thing at a time, an immediate next step, and then prioritize features that correlate to increased retention in the first 3 days. Hold back the rest. So I want to pay attention to that third point for a second. When apps are complicated or where there's a lot for learners, we are forced as designers, as UI designers, to prioritize. And we are forced to say, okay, this is more of a pro users feature, or this is something that they might use when they are on this app for longer than an hour, right? And so if that's the case, we can hold back that part of the onboarding and really deliver it the second time you open the app, or after they are done with the main onboarding, or when they start a particular feature. So there are a lot of different ways to chunk it up. And I would say retention, anything that would help people understand the app and be able to come back to it and use it in their daily life, is the top priority. I'm not seeing my slides change. Okay, finally, it changed. Great. So the literacy spectrum is a really important thing to pay attention to. As designers, we know that we're not designing for ourselves. We're not designing for our team. We're designing for a full spectrum of people. And apart from being novice to something or proficient in something, people also might have different ways that they understand information. And abstraction is a really interesting thing because on one end, metaphors are a really great way to explain something. But at the same time, many users struggle with abstraction. So I would say this is where user testing comes into play very heavily. If you have a few concepts, a few hypotheses, test them early, test them quickly, and then just see, how much abstraction is good for the user. In terms of the literacy, there are a few other aspects in play here that we'll always need to keep in mind. People are afraid to break things. They're afraid that there's going to be no undo, that there's going to be no way of going fast. So we need to always frame something as like, it's okay to try. This is not final. This is something that you're just testing out. So copywriting is really, really important. From the UX standpoint, of course, allowing for easy undos, easy go back to previous steps, easy skip is really, really important to really make people feel no fear, to feel like they're, that all the mistakes are forgiven. And last but not least, we need to always build upon the familiar. So we need to think if these users are coming from a mobile app, like in the case of Google Apps, right? A lot of people are using Google Maps on their phone. What can we borrow from a very, very familiar interface on the phone and bring it to the XR space? So people can always anchor their experiences and anchor what they're doing on the familiar things, and they feel more comfortable that way. And then once users learn, get them to apply it right away, right? That is what we're talking about, the relevancy, the contextual aspect of it. Why am I learning this? And once I've learned it, let me try it right away. So context of use is key. Users learn best one thing at a time. I said it like 5 times and I'll say it again, especially if it attached to their time, curiosity, and what they're solving for. And also creating mental models and always thinking about which mental models we're creating. We need to be very, very aware of that as designers and understand how is the product perceived? What is the product perceived as a tool for? Last but not least, metrics. I know this was a lot. We'll get to discuss it in a second. We're trying to get a lot of insights really, really condensed here. But metrics is a really, really important thing to think about ahead of time. If you're working on an app that's already out in the world, take a look at your metrics, identify one action that users could coming back for, right? And place metrics around that, or like build your onboarding around that. If you're not there yet, if you're designing an app that's not out in the world yet, take your time to build a hypothesis around the core action and value of your product to set up the right metrics and build onboarding around. I know this was a lot. I think what would be really, really helpful is to put all of this together on a very, very concrete example and discuss how this all works based on this. So as I mentioned, I'm working on Google Maps right now. The product is not released yet. It's going to be released in the headsets. But we have a really, really strong app that we're based off of, and that is Google Earth. If you ever tried Google Earth VR, give me a shout out. I would love to discuss that. But I would love to show the onboarding for Google Earth. And it's a little bit of a lengthy onboarding. We do have sound there, but I don't think we have sound on Riverside today, unfortunately. But it's really, really beautiful upbeat music, and the soundscape is a really important thing to pay attention to when you're designing onboarding, especially in terms of feedback. When you did something correctly, when you want to signal to the people that they're moving to the next stage. But for now, I'm just going to show you a video without sound. So this is a video of Google Earth, how it used to be a few years ago. So this is a few years back, and of course, this is no end tracking. This is controllers only. But I think this is a really great example of an XR onboarding that works across many different modalities, in many different ways, and educates the user and rewards the user for doing that. So when we're starting, there's a really beautiful sunrise. And you get kind of, we saw those tooltips that showcase how you should be using your controllers. And then it takes you to different places on Earth. It lets you kind of tour the world as you're learning the main details. Um, so right now you see that you're in Tokyo, that you see that you're in welcome tour, how long you've already been there, how much is left. I think it's a really great idea, specifically for an app like this, to showcase some cool capabilities. You know, somebody might be in a very rural location and they might be only interested in seeing what's around them. So you want to expand the world of it and show the possibilities. And this is what the onboarding that takes you to different places and shows you on this little globe at the bottom is designed for. So it both shows all the value and in a second order to see how you can work with the UI as well. Hope nobody's feeling motion sickness. I know it's not recording, that will be tricky. But yeah, let's just wait a few more seconds until we get to the UI onboarding. Once we're finished with the tour, now you can see the beautiful Earth from afar. And we're going to see new things from the UI onboarding as well. Okay, so we're getting the headline, learn how to explore. So it tells you step 1 out of 7. And we're teaching you, first up, how to drag there. Now, how to fly towards there, right? So like the most immediate things, you probably want to zoom in. So those are the first things that we're going to teach you how to do, right? We showed you it close up, and now we're showing you how to use it when you're starting from afar. So you can see there's a planet mode and there's an aerial mode. And in order to prevent motion sickness, when you're placing something ahead of you, we're telling the user that you're actually the one who is initiating the ground going up. There are some featured pre-selected locations so that people don't need to like kind of think like, oh, where do I need to go? How do I learn? We're actually taking you to really great, beautiful pre-selected locations. And we're also showing, this is one of my favorite features, that you can actually change the time of day by dragging the sun and sky. Like, my mind was blown the first time I saw that. And then finally, the 7th step is to save the place. And they're showing exactly how this corresponds to a button on your controller, where it's getting saved, which location exactly is getting saved, and that the tutorial is complete. So yes, 7 steps is the maximum amount that we can possibly do, but it seemed pretty effortless. It seemed pretty fast. It seemed pretty painless. And the whole time when you're doing it, you're engaged. You're in the sense of, oh, you're understanding exactly why you were doing this, which is very, very exciting. We're almost about to switch to Q&A, but the last thing I wanted to tease out, another project I cannot talk a lot about, but I am currently also engaged on a remaster of Bjork's visual album Volikura for Apple Living Braille and Quest and first Google products. And we're rethinking the onboarding there as well. So I just wanted to give a quick teaser of the app and kind of like set up the stage that even for something as artistic, so Google Earth was really utilitarian, this is a very artistic project. This is a visual album. This is a location scanned in Iceland. This is many different videos directed by 7 different directors. They're contextually were done for a Bjork digital exhibition for the museums like MoMA all around the world, and then sampled in a VR app afterwards. So there's a lot of really interesting UI. There's a lot of really interesting setup for experiences. But this will be the case where onboarding is very, very minimal, and it kind of steps back to really let art shine. Oh, this is excited for mouth. This is really, really funny. But yeah, Bjork is a genius. I'm very honored to be working on a project with her. And hopefully, maybe when we're done with it, I can come back and talk a little bit more about.
Thank you so much, Liya. That was so cool. Really love to see the kind of cross pollination between your like background in so many different areas in tech. Seeing like a financial chart in a healthcare app was really, really fun. Really enjoyed that, and the breakdown of Google Earth's onboarding was really sick. I know that app holds like a special place in a lot of people's hearts, and I know lots of people still use it as like the app to first show people like what XR is. So I'm super excited for like its successor to exist in the world, whenever that is.
Did you hear me okay, guys? Was not too much noise in the background? Okay, perfect. I just have tons of hundreds of people walking in front of me.
No, it surprisingly went really well for for coming live from South by Southwest. Um, Brilliant. So we have one question already from someone by the handle of Flow Up Design, who says, as designers, how much of this falls under interactive experience design, and how much of it is specific to UI implementation?
I think it's hard to divide. It's like all just so merged. I think even UX and UI is super like you have to be a Swiss knife. There's no other way around it. There's no clear boundaries. I would say when I started in the field of UX, which was over 10 years ago, there was a little bit of a clear division, like, oh, you're doing wireframes, and then you're working with somebody who's doing design, and then you're working with somebody who implements it. It was like very, very clear cut 10 years ago. But now I would say just lean into your strength and curiosities. So as a UX designer, you need to be a strategist. You need to have experience in user testing, and you need to understand user research. You need to understand how you lay everything out in a way that benefits the user. But then you also start designing the screen. So for instance, at Google, when you are a UX designer, you are actually designing approximately 50 to 80% of visual as well. So UI as well. And then you have a visual design team to come in and bring that 10%, 15, 20% of the final polish, right? But I would say I do a lot of UI still, a lot of it, right? And then in terms of the interaction, again, lean into your strength, curiosities. If you can do animation, if you can do interactive prototypes, that's great. If you can work in Unity, that's great. If you can work in Blender, that's great. If you can use shapes, XR, Spline, these are all really great tools to use, but you don't have to. At least you need to know how to partner with prototypers, with engineers, with people who can build it for you and effectively communicate your thought, and also always be thinking about how the user is going to be using it. It's not static screens. It's not two-dimensional. It's three-dimensional. We have motion sickness to think about. We have to think about, like, what if somebody tapped them on the shoulder? We need to think about pass-through versus full immersion. There are so many things to think through, but it really comes naturally. The more you think about it, the more you test early, the more you iterate, the more naturally it comes to you. So none of these things are something that are proactively, like, oh, I need to think about that. It just, over time, you just know that you need to think about it. And yeah, I hope this answers the question. Not if we're going to do it anymore.
One thing I was really interested in is, do you have any anecdotes around bad onboarding that you've seen in XR? Or something that, like, maybe you thought, oh man, they could have done the onboarding so much better here. I know I've designed bad onboarding in the past myself, and had to remedy that.
Yeah. I would not use the word bad, because the reason I'm saying that I would not yet use it, I would reserve the word bad for areas where there are really clear best practices. Like, you can have bad onboarding for a mobile, because mobile apps have been around so long, you know exactly what a good onboarding feels like. You know exactly when somebody violates best practices. For XR, it's different because it's such a new field in a way, or like it's such a fast evolving field. I would say I take apps with almost no onboarding, which is frustrating, right? It's just like not designed. And then I see apps that have too much onboarding. For instance, Shapes XR is a really good tool. It's a great tool, but learning it is hard. You feel like it's so much UI. The way that they teach you is just overwhelming. And they're very smart people. I would not call this bad onboarding, but I would say it's an overwhelming onboarding. I would say this is onboarding that needs to be iterated on, that needs to be simplified, that needs to, like, I have a hard time using Shapes XR because it feels just too much, So that's an example. And with all the respect to people who build it, it's not easy to design good onboarding. And I just think it's an iterative thing. You just need to keep improving it and keep improving it. So I would say Shapes XR has an MVP version of onboarding right now. It works, but it's a little bit of a struggle to get into.
I know that team are, like, actively working on it, because I a couple years ago I picked up ShapesXR and basically spent an entire afternoon, like, watching videos and, like, going through it and trying to work it out. But I know this year they shipped, like, the beginnings of some interactive onboarding for it, and hopefully they'll improve that. I had an app I sent to CES that literally just had like tooltips that appeared, and yeah, that was the wrong decision for onboarding. It was like super new hand tracking interactions that needed like super clear cut, like space and time for people to like breathe in and take it in. And we eventually nailed it, but takes that iteration, right?
You're really great, so I'm sure you nailed it. But like even just what you're saying, the way that XR field has changed in the recent years, like you used to only have to think about controllers and how do you teach people specific buttons on controllers. And now you have to think about hand tracking and how hand tracking works on Apple versus how it works on Quest versus how it will work on, the Google. And like, it's just a lot, right? So I think we always need to move towards simplification, move towards establishing the best practices just because, every device has their own best practices right now. And this is not ideal for the user.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not. So we had a couple more questions coming in the chat that I've been neglecting. So we had, if you're working on a more complicated application, how would you recommend to break down onboarding? Break down into multiple onboarding chunks, something else?
Yeah, I touched upon it a little bit in my principles, but basically, when you think about how people use your app, you need to think like, what are the most immediate needs, the things that they need to do right up with that. With Google Earth, we just see like we need to zoom in, pan around, rotate immediately. Like if there are advanced features, we can teach them later, but they're kind of the basics. It's almost like the Maslow pyramid of needs for the user, right? We need the student shelter first. And then we need kind of like self-actualization next. So I would say apply the Maslow pyramid of needs to onboarding, chunking, and onboarding prioritization, and you cannot go wrong there.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, I guess so. Another question we had was, um, how do you build how do you think about building business need into the app, into like a 3D application in XR? And how do you kind of, yeah, I'm not 100% sure I get that question, but maybe you do.
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned that, like, as a UX designer, you're always thinking about business needs. You are kind of a mediator. If we think about, law, and courtroom or whatever, like a mediator, somebody who has interests of both parties, in front of them, right? And their goal is to hope that people can get to a resolution without actually going to court, like settling. So in a way, a UX designer is a mediator. You have the interests of business on one hand, and you have the interests of the user on the other hand. Business needs to sell products. Business needs retention. Business needs subscriptions. Business needs all these things. User does not want to pay, does not want to subscribe, does not want to come back, but they have problems they want to solve, right? And so you kind of mediate at all times. So you always think about business needs and you always think about user values and try to make it as effortless as possible. And that's, I think, one of the hardest parts of the job.
Good. Okay, so we have another question here. How much pre-existing knowledge do you expect people to have in XR? Do you expect them to at least the basics, know the basics, I'm assuming?
Yeah, and so what is interesting is really all the headsets have the unboxing experience. So if you buy a headset, you have already gone through the onboarding for the operating system, which is a whole other beast to design. That's a whole other thing of itself, how to onboard the users to the operating system, which I did not work on the onboarding for the operating system. I specifically worked on the onboarding for apps. But it's really good to know like what they have already learned when they were onboarding to the system, and you build on top of that. So in a way, again, if we return to the Maslow's pyramid of needs, like your very foundation is covered by them initially learning how to use the headset, and then you're building on top of that. It becomes trickier when an owner of the headset lends their headset to somebody else who has never used it before. And so in a way, it was like when I say like I own a Quest. You've never used Quest. I'm going to give my Quest for you to use. So first, I need to show you how to use the Quest, and that kind of falls on me as somebody who gives it to you. And then the apps picks up from there, right? So I almost forgot the question I was answering. What was the question? How much?
I think how much pre-existing knowledge do you expect people
Yeah,
to have in XR? I'm assuming not from a design perspective, but from a user like adoption
yeah,
perspective.
almost not. But the way you do, you assume that users cannot do anything, but if they can, you give them an easy way to skip to the part that would be new to them, and give them a reason. So, for instance, if somebody used EarthVR before, but they're going to be onboarding to MapsXR, we can say like, here are the things we're going to teach you. You can skip them, but you're also going to skip a really cool new tour that you haven't seen before. So maybe give them a reason to stick around.
Cool. So, I mean, how much we're going until 12:30? We have another 15 minutes, or because I want to open up a bunch of different boxes and create some interesting discussion, but I don't. I know I was at South by South last year, so I know it's very stressful and chaotic.
But
So,
let's assume 10 minutes, and I'll try to go like rapid fire or as deep as you would like, whenever you prefer.
okay, I always love talking to you because I like getting in it with you. So
Thank
right
you.
now, like I feel that so next week Pip and I are going to be talking online about the state of the XR industry, right? And it seems now like you talked about briefly about Shapes XR, their onboarding and all that stuff. And I think that one of the things is kind of concerning, but it's gonna evolve over time. And what you're weighing right now is taking existing content and trying to bring it into a new medium. But right now, the medium itself is, I would say, in a medically induced coma. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with the medically induced coma. It's done strategically. It's not dead. It's not on life support. We put it to sleep a little bit because, as we've talked about briefly in other conversations, technologically, like from a supply chain and from a compute power perspective, it's really difficult to bring down the cost, make it ergonomical. But I think one of the things that kind of does do a lot of disservice in XR is that I don't think that anyone has at least any major player has utilized the medium in a way that brings forth the value proposition of the product. And I think it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? Like you can't just reinvent the wheel out of nowhere. You need the ability to create a system that people can scale upon and build into versus just kick down the door and do something new. But like with Shapes XR especially, like it seems like there's so many fundamentals of just inputs and things that just don't exist right now. Like what do you think are going to be the struggles that we're going to have to get over for XR to be a viable medium?
So many, honestly. I would say on the positive note, the fact that AI is now being embedded into XR is one of the biggest, like, this is what positioned Google's headset and Google announcement out of everyone, is because nobody has really implemented AI to an extent that becomes so helpful, right? You can just say like, hey, open this up, do this for me. Like it listens to you. It can instinctively understand it. You can operate the whole OS with just your voice, which is fantastic. You can accomplish so many stuff. I wouldn't even say that it is an medically induced coma. We just had a huge breakthrough with implementing AI into it. It is expensive. It is so expensive now to run AI on the background all the time, constantly listening, constantly processing, constantly screenshotting, constantly, understanding what you're staring at in order to always be helpful. So the size of devices, the cost of processing, like all of these things are, I would say, biggest obstacles. But what we really need is a true daily utility that is universal. It's not just for XR space. It's universal for any innovative aspect. When smart watches were first released, nobody knew what would be the hero use case for them. So they were released with every single app out there. It's like you throw so much at the wall and you see what sticks. At the end of the day, when I go to the gym, 90% of the people wear smart watches in the gym. Like I could have never expected that. There you go. I could have never expected that 10 years ago, and fitness is the hero use case for it. We need to figure out the hero use case for XR. Something like with AI, we can see ChatGPT became so prominent so fast because it helped people save time, save money, right? It brought convenience forward. So we need to figure out a use case for people that would be worse for them to get over the hurdle. So we need to hear a use case that would save people time, save people money, make something more convenient, supercharge something that already exists. I always bring up the idea of QR codes. QR codes have been around since 1994. They were invented in Japan. QR codes were just a weird thing that only a few use, if you really get it. Now we get COVID, and now we can't touch things, and suddenly QR codes are everywhere, and everybody's QR literate, right? And so sometimes it's a black swan event that you cannot predict that might happen. Sometimes it's just things are lighter. Maybe, I would say if we could solve navigation inside of the cars by overlaying your directions on top of what you're seeing, that would be a huge use case for AR in cars. We just need to implement it, solve it. We don't need phone holders anymore. Your directions are in front of you on your windshield, but in a way that's safe, in a way that's in distress. Maybe we'll never get there because cars will drive themselves before we even need to see the direction. So these are a lot of really philosophical questions, but I think they're important ones to solve. And you know what? Being in this industry before it's massively adopted is really rewarding. It's really rewarding. So in a way, I'm like, oh yes, you guys switched your Discord to more general designs, but there is quite a bit of staying new to go.
There is. I think that at the moment, what interests, XR has, it's such a broad term, right? So, but if we're talking about the AR, VR space, I think that there's a lot of exciting stuff, and I do believe that you're right, that AI is the key to a lot of this space, and I think it's going to be probably the early ground. XR is going to be the early ground where we're going to be able to see AI really take its legs, and I think AI being able to dynamically create UI for people is probably going to be the most important part of XR, and is probably going to move up the medium. And I don't think we're going to see that on mobile devices anytime soon, mainly because of the constraints of business needs, their monetization, as well as a lot of these operating systems are held together with bubble gum and tape to a certain extent. You can't really do much, especially when it comes to the security stuff. But I think that XR is incredibly important, and that's why. But I also think AI is even more important when it comes down to the health of XR. And so that's why I think Google is probably in a better position, and they've positioned themselves with an open source structure, especially for their operating system, that is super important. But it's also interesting that they are building their system in a way that's going against the realm of both Meta and Apple in a way that feels the way it should be. But I do think that from how do we measure success, right? Because are we measuring off of mass consumer success and adoption? Are we doing it off of sales numbers?
I have an anecdote for you that will answer that question, if I may. So I live in Hawaii, which I didn't mention yet. It's very, very warm. And in Hawaii, you don't always need a car. Sometimes you can just drive around on a scooter, which I do very often. So here's the anecdote. I got the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which don't have an AR overlay. They're mostly kind of voice commands. They can take photos, take videos. And I got them just to try out for a month. I personally do not align with Meta's values. So I returned them in a month. I was like, let me try them, but I don't want to associate. I don't stand behind what Zuckerberg stands. Yeah, I just don't agree with a lot of things. I'm not going to use the pocket. I miss the pocket. I miss it because, first of all, I was wearing, it solved two things. Normally when you put your headphones in, you need to, pair them or whatever. I just put on glasses, headphones, immediately turn on. So what I did, I would sit on my scooter, put on my glasses, they're on immediately. I'm like, hey, Meta, play Sabrina Carpenter. Next song, play Sabrina Carpenter this. Okay, take a photo, take a video. Hey, what is this I'm seeing? Can you take a picture of this? Can you translate it? All hands-free while I'm both of my hands are driving. It was so convenient. And the fact that they were just the moment you put them on, they paired. You don't need anything else. The charge stayed on for days. I returned them. I miss them. I'm still struggling using normal headphones right now because that was so convenient. And I could drive the scooter 30 miles an hour. The noise canceling was amazing. Nobody heard the wind blow up, right? I could have a full-on phone conversation while zapping down the street. So this was an example of a use case where so much convenience and value was brought to me by the voice control interface that I built a habit within 30 days. And that's what we need for XR. And that, like, sometimes you don't know what combinations of factors will bring it. It's a combination of voice input, overlay, ability to take photos, record videos, play music, take all of. What is a combination of features that will become so sticky that it will build a habit within a week? And people will be just like, I will do anything to have it. So that is a really, really interesting question. I know that the next few years are going to be the years of wearables and glasses once somebody cracks them. And Google is also working on that. I'm very, very excited. So we'll see.
Well, this was a fun conversation. We have a minute left. I appreciate you joining us and talking about your experiences. I'm super excited. I guess they didn't put a release date on the headset yet, right?
No, but it's this year.
Okay, it's this year. So that's very exciting. Cool. Well, I would love to chat with you more, but you're a busy gal. I appreciate it. Have fun at South by Southwest. It is chaos.
Thank you. Yeah, I would encourage, I'll drop you a few links. I would encourage anybody who's interested in connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have an innovation newsletter, which acts as like literally a place for me to nerd out on everything. Like it's like every single innovation subject, philosophically and practically. So I would love for everybody to sign up. And I'm always open to chatting, and hopefully I'll come back and when things are released, that's one of my favorite, when I finally get to like nerd out and say everything. 8 NDAs.
I hear ya.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. I would love to connect. It's an exciting time. Very fast forward time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liya.
Thank you.
Hey. Before you go, I just want to let you know about Mainly Human Design. We're a community of designers focused on human-centered design in an age of AI and XR. We're really excited about these technologies, but we think you need to keep the human at the center of them in order to design best for them. We're a group on Discord. We host monthly talks and hangouts, and I'd love to see you there. Find the link in the description.